Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, July 5th. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm a bit under the weather today. I think got that, virus is going around. So if I start coughing and, too much, I might have to cut the show short. But for now, so far so good. I got a huge cup of my throat coat yogi tea with some honey in there. And I got a huge stack of poems to look at, and I hate to miss this because it's one of the funnest parts of the week, doing the critique every time. It's really fun just looking back at poems and seeing what works and what doesn't. We've got a great crowd on hand, as we always do. Mark Grenier is here, Nancy Tunnell, James Langford, got Jamie Thomas, Annie Blanchard, Brian O'Sullivan, Steve Harrell, Sheila Munn, Morgan Feeney, Nancy Sabanik, Emily Arnold Fernandez. We got Brandy Askin, who's a new name to me. We got Sharon Ferrante's here, Sandra Fees, Katie Dozier, hey Katie, over in Las Vegas, getting ready for the next round at the World Series of Poker. We've got Holly Elliott here, Hamat Malak, Tom Barlow, Gary Rawson, let's see, Amy Dower, Solorzano, Mary Keating is here. Okay, over on Facebook, less on Facebook, we got Radoslav Stoyanov. We've got Nate Jacob, we've got Jimmy Middleton, and we've got Laura Buxbaum. Yeah, well, very interesting. Okay, so today is going to be one of those days where we take a look at the oldest submissions in the queue to try to get through as many as we can. And we've got, we got 77 in the queue. They date back to December. Now, as always, the goal is to give that workshop experience and just tell people what we actually think, what actually works, what doesn't, where we're connected. You know, a poem is all about connection. And it's really important to know, where a reader is connecting with you and where they're not, like where we feel lost, where we feel engaged. You sort of have this suspension of disbelief that happens when you conjure up the world through the magic of poetry. And then sometimes that magic starts to fade and you start seeing you remember you have to pee or whatever. And so focusing on what works and what doesn't is usually the best way. If we have any other suggestions, word choices, line breaks, things like that, we like to talk about them. Now, the first poet we have up, and I should say, too, if you'd like to participate in the critique of the week, these are not regular submissions. These are all people who wanted their poems to be critiqued. One of the reasons I do this, I started this, 5 or 6 years ago, is so that, people always say, after we decline their poems, we say, hey, can I have some feedback? And now I can say, hey, send it to the critique of the week, and we'll talk about it. Everybody can learn in the process, and it's much better that way. So to participate, all you have to do is go to rattle.com/critique, and then you find that. I also want to do a quick reminder that the Rattle Poetry Prize is coming up. Do I have a, let's see. Yeah, we got a slide for that. So the Rattle Poetry Prize deadline is July 15th. That is a 1-year subscription is the entry fee. If you're already a subscriber, you get an extra year on your subscription. $15,000 for a single poem, an additional $10,000 more in prizes, $25,000 total given out for single poems in the Rattle Poetry Prize. But the deadline is coming up in just 10 days, July 15th. So get your submissions in. It's our main fundraiser, how we fund all, a lot of the stuff. It's about half of our revenue. The other half is just from our endowment, which Alan Fox set up very kindly many years ago. And that's how Rattle functions. So half the endowment, half the poetry prize, pretty much. And, well, subscribers, too, just in general, because you get a subscription with the Rattle Poetry Prize. But, we have about, 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers, too, who are happy to pay for that same thing without doing the contest. But anyway, the first poet coming up is, this is a submission from December 6th, and from Cincinnati, Ohio. And it's Ava Benner. And Ava had a couple questions, too. There's a little spot for general questions you can ask. So Ava says, do you think there is a way to ground this poem better? Oh, very good question. Shows you've been paying attention, because grounding is very important. We're creating a space. We have to find a way to feel like we're in the space in order to get that empathy rolling. Any suggestions on storytelling aspects or ways to reframe the perspective? So there's 2 poems here, storytelling and escapism. And let's take a look. So to future me, I can't breathe is the poem. Again, this is Ava Benner, submission from December. Breathless. Not the same as the gasp you get from soft kisses, not the exhale you get from finally rounding that last lap on the track, not the wheeze you suck in from laughing too hard that your sides hurt. Breathless, like feeling your throat close in on itself, the exasperated coughing you get from from sobbing for so long, the shallow hiss of exhaustion after losing yourself to hot, sticky tears. You can't stabilize. Breathless. The weight feels like a boot stepping on your lungs. Every call and text pushes you farther and further out to sea, gasping and gurgling up memories, exhaling fire that burns from your ribcage, wheezing, unable to control yourself. Breathless. Our fists full of air, hair, or seaweed, scratching at skin and surroundings. Am I drowning? Breathless. Throat clenched, eyes blurred, body heating and cooling quickly, hands shaking, breathless. You sink to the bottom of the ocean and wake up in bed. Sweat sticks to every inch, your lips quiver. And you remember, you made the bed that you're lying in. Breathless, not the same as the gasp you get from soft kisses, not the exhale you get from finally rounding that last lap on the track. Not the wheezing you suck in from laughing too hard that your sides hurt. Breathless. So that is the first poem, Breathless, again by Ava Brenner. And, yeah. Okay, so first of all, let's see. Morgan Feeney says, hot, sticky tears, exhaling fire. A little cliche for me. I like the fistful of hair or seaweed. Yeah, there's some good lines here. The first thing that jumps out to me, to future me, I can't breathe. Now, I can't breathe, of course, is a sort of a phrase, sort of a political slogan that we see a lot. And so it ends up, you get so many. It's one of those things where if I can't breathe is used, I've seen it so many times used in poems, I assume it's going to be, a Black Lives Matter type reference. It's in the same way that, like, after the COVID pandemic, there were, like, that year, we have, like, a few thousand entries to the poetry contest, the chapbook prize, every year. And I swear, like, of the couple thousand, like 300 were named the COVID diaries or pandemic diaries, It's just something you see over and over and over again. So there's this whole, like, we have cliches, which are, the thing with a cliche is that, there's a way that, fresh language makes new neural connections and, like, stimulates it's sort of like a way of learning. It's a way of learning how to perceive the world. And when it's something that we already have heard a lot, it's already sort of concretized its own unit, and we don't get the same sort of stimulation. We don't remember it as well. It's just sort of, in one ear and out the other because we've heard it so many times. And the I can't breathe phrase kind of feels like that to anybody who's been reading submissions at all, at least. And then it ends up not going in that direction either. So it's like a false direction as well. So I think the first thing I would avoid using that phrase unless there's a really good reason and unless it's about that topic, because there's just so many. It's like a poetry cliche to use to write about I can't breathe, and this isn't even it. So it sort of steers you in a false direction. So we got to come up with a better title first of all. Now the second thing I was going to say is what I saw the corner of my eye. Annie Blanchard is agreeing with someone else and saying, yes, too much breathless, and that breathless refrain just comes out too much, where it starts to lose in the same way. Pound said, make it new. And that's because new is stimulating, and so when you repeat something, there has to be sort of a reason why it's becoming like a mantra and like building up. And if it's not building up, then it's building down. Like there's only two ways to go. It's either up or down. And if it's down, it's detracting from the poem. And here I think the breathless isn't adding anything. And as we go on, and maybe if we're happening a few times, but it happens too much. Yeah, Brandon Sullivan says, I think the to future me part of the title is intriguing, but I want to learn more about why the speaker expects their future self to need to hear this. And that's the third thing. So you guys are all over everything what I was going to say. Those are my three thoughts, and I didn't have to articulate them myself because you're all here and so good. So into the future me is something that makes it, we're wondering as soon as we see that in the title. And I think it's good to make a title that has somebody, has us wondering. We want to know, but we want to know what that is. Like, why are you breathless? And give us a little bit more of the story. Let's see. Leah Holmes says, where do you think the refrain limit usually is? Yeah, the limit on the refrain, it just depends on the feel of it and how much you're sort of varying. And you have to have a sense of the way that it's functioning emotionally. A villanelle will repeat. And there's a rule of 3 too, just in general. And there's a really good reason for that, because we're sort of trained to look at threes, because threes signify an actual pattern, like an actual curve that we can see. Whereas like 2 might be like a fluke that just happens to line up, but 3 is where the first time we can know. And so there's a reason why that's that. That's why there's a rule of 3 in art. We divide up canvases into 3, that kind of thing. So a lot of times 3, and then if you look at like a villanelle, it has the 2 lines that are refraining through, and they each appear 3 times. And so that's a sort of, but there's really no way to say, because it depends on the sort of emotional energy of the poem. And a much more performative, energy-driven, rhythmically driven poem, you can get away with a lot more repetition. But the Breathless is just one line here in a poem that's not, I mean, it has a good amount of energy, but it's not a poem. It's not used in a way that can sustain a lot of them, I think. Anyway, let's look at the poem a little more closely now that we've talked in general with our initial reactions. So to future me, I can't breathe. Breathless, not the same as the gasp you get from soft kisses. Kisses is one of those borderline, it feels a little bit, melodramatic, not quite cliche, but like used a lot. So you had to make, every time you use kisses, it has to be like really good use of it. The same as the gasp you get from soft kisses is pretty interesting. So I think that's okay, but it's bordering. It's something to be, careful about. Not the exhale you get from finally rounding that last lap on the track. Not the wheeze you suck from laughing too hard that your sides hurt. Should that be, someone pointed out, should that be so hard? And I think too, I think it's just a typo maybe. So hard that your sides hurt. Breathless. Like feeling your throat close in on itself, the exasperated cough you get from sobbing for too long, the shallow hiss of exhaustion after losing yourself to hot, sticky tears. Again, tears, kisses, hearts, all those things are just sort of overdone. And so avoid as much as possible certain words like that are just used, just overdone and sort of melodramatic. So find a different way to say that. You can't stabilize. Breathless. The weight feels like a boot stepping on your lungs. See, if we varied the repetition, one of the reasons why the repetition isn't working is we have this full end stop with each one. So it's like breathless, stop. The weight, blah, blah, blah. So it feels like a colon, like this is the definition. And, if we did this, if we took out breathless and made this a whole sentence that just happened to have breathless, then we get away with more, I can't change it, sorry. I was thinking I was still in a Word document, but I was just watching on the screen. But anyway, if you deleted this and instead made this breathless like a boot stepping on your lungs, so it was all one, one sentence where that was just the start, the opening clause of the sentence, then you could get away with a lot more breathless because you have the variation, you have the same word to start, and you have that pattern, but then you have different ways you're going about it. But the fact that you're isolating them and cutting them off with that period makes it feel redundant and repetitive. So Winston Munn says, I think this poem needs an entry point. What is going on that leads to breathless? Yeah, so we're still missing that. And I'm reading this a second time, seeing if maybe I missed something, but I don't think so. Every call and text pushes you farther and farther out to sea, gasping and gurgling up memories. Exhaling fire that burns from your ribcage, wheezing, unable to control yourself, breathless. Our fists full of hair or seaweed. See, the fists full of hair or seaweed is an interesting image. Like that, when we talk about make it new, like that's something we don't see. We see a lot of hot, sticky tears. We see a lot of kisses, but fists full of hair or seaweed is something that's interesting and unusual. And that's the kind of thing that'll stick. It's sticky. It's sticky in your mind. And the whole point of the poem is to have this memorable experience that we create and recreate every time we read the poem. And so you want poems to be sticky in the mind, and by doing that, by making it new and fresh and original. That's why we say make it new. So that's an example of making it new working. Scratching at skin and surroundings, am I drowning? Breathless, throat clenched, eyes blurred, body heating and cooling quickly, hands shaking, breathless. So other than this breathless that's sort of stopping the momentum, the poem does have a lot of momentum and a lot of rhetorical energy. And And like, so you can feel that the poet has an ear. You can hear the rhythm playing itself out in a really nice way. So there's this musical energy to the poem. So that's one positive of it. You sink to the bottom of the ocean and wake up in bed. And that's interesting too. Sinking to the bottom of the ocean and waking up in bed is a surprising thing. So that's something interesting too. So those are the lines to highlight and sort of do more of that. Sweat sticks to every inch, your lips quiver, and you remember, and I'm not sure, this shouldn't be capitalized, and you remember you made the bed that you're lying in. Breathless, not the same as the gasp you get from soft kisses, and we repeated that. Not the exhale from finally running the live track. So we repeat the beginning at the end, which can occasionally work, especially with more performative poems, like a callback. But these had to be great lines that sort of change by the end, and they're sort of haven't yet. So really the main thing is you made the bed and you're lying in it. You made the bed that you're lying in, which calls back to future me. So what is the story? What are we talking about? We just don't know. Yeah. So Nancy Tinnell says, is this a nightmare? Yeah, but we just don't know. And like we always say in this critique, we want to hear your stories. That's why we're reading poems. It's a way to hear more story, as D. Coleman says. So we just don't get to know. And if you get to know what the actual situation is, like why you're breathless, then we get to experience the experience of it sort of its own accord. But if we don't know why you're breathless, we can't really relate, so we can't connect, we can't experience it. We're sort of wondering what's going on, like we're drifting in a kind of limbo where we can't tell where the ground is. So that's calling back to grounding. Brian O'Sullivan says the you made the bed part makes me wonder if this is a smoker who is blaming his future self for loss of lung function. And so see, that's an example, and that could be. Like, all we can do is sort of speculate what you're actually writing about, and because we have to do that, we can't connect. As Hemat Malak says very well, very clearly, very strong emotions, but we want to know. And so there we go. So we need to know what the poem is about in order to feel and appreciate it. Laura Buxbaum says, I think it's contrasting the breathless feeling of new love with the breathlessness of love's loss. And that's a perfectly good theory too. But the thing is, we're making up theories, and so we don't know where to put these emotions. And so we don't connect with them because we don't know what they connect to. I'm just trying to explain it as many ways as I can, but we need to know some more. Mark Greener says the ending seems to return to the beginning, but why? And that's the thing. So anyway, I think we're going to move on from this. So for this poem, we want to know the story. You can't skip story. Even if the story is like presented in one like extended metaphor, like we're looking. We had a poetry space I think recently about metaphor, right? What was that? Or no, we didn't have. We had a so you got the brain fog a little bit. We had a prompt that was to use an extended metaphor, and one of the poems we used an example, which I'll just pull up really quickly to show you, is this. This was a Rattle Neil Postman Award for Metaphor winner, Divorce by Jose A. Alcantara. And just by having the title. So if you read it without the title, it's about a bird, right? He has flown headfirst against the glass and now lies stunned on the stone patio, nothing moving but his quick beating heart. And the poem goes on from there, having no idea. It would be like this. If we said, breathless, drowning in the sea, sinking into the bottom of the ocean and waking up in bed, blah, blah, blah. We could all do that if we had a title like Divorce, so we knew that it was all about divorce, And so that's the kind of thing. All it takes is one word here to let us know the story, and then we understand the story. But it never, nowhere else in the poem. Go find this. I won't read it all, but go find this and on rattle.com, and you'll see that it never mentions divorce at all. But that's exactly what the poem is about. And so having that one access is the key. Is all you need. And so when we talk about needing the story here, what is that story? Why does the future me want to know? And that can really help us connect with it more if we know what's going on. Okay, let's look at the other poem. And again, this is Ava Brenner, and the poem is Lost. So the reason why we like to have two, if possible, is so we can see, that kind of if they have the same issues going on, or if it's just like a one-off poem that was, because we want to, as poets, experiment and try different things, and it might not be that we write the same way every time. So if you have two poems, we can sort of see if it's a trend, or if it's just something that happened once, and we can talk about other things. So here's Lost by Ava Brenner. or Benner. I keep putting an R in there. Sorry, Ava Benner. There is a sort of soft wind when something passes by, a sort of whisper that wasn't caught in time. A million moments shift before your eyes, yet they aren't the ones you idolize. Stop and think about what could have happened. Who have you missed? Where have you been? There's a sort of soft wind when something passes you by, a new friendship or a moment to cry. A million moments shift before your eyes, yet none of them seem right. Stop and think about what could have happened. What did you miss? How long has it been? There is a sort of wind that passes you by, the voice of a child or a hand waving goodbye. A million moments shift before your eyes, full of emptiness and no one to identify. You stop and think about what could have happened. When did you miss that? How has it been too long since? There's a sort of wind when something passes you by. It whistles through your hollow ribs and pools out of your eyes, and suddenly you've met your demise. So again, this is why we do two exact same thing. We know loss, but we don't know what the loss is. We don't know what's going on. And so we can't connect. Even though there's nice lines, there's a really nice rhythm, a sense of ear and voice. And a lot of times you see poetries and submissions and in the critique where it's clear that the poets don't actually read. You just don't read a lot. So you don't have any kind of ear or sense of like pace and rhythm in the music that we're putting forth. And here we definitely have that. As people mentioned, we have really nice some rhymes coming through. There's a nice metricality to it too for some of the lines, and those lines are the best lines. We were talking to that was the Poetry Space. We were talking to Boris Dralyuk on the last episode of the Poetry Space about meter. And one of the things he mentioned that was really interesting is he noticed a lot of poems have a first line that's a really good line that starts in iambic pentameter, and then they break down into free verse. And that kind of goes on here. The best lines have a kind of sense of meter to them, and then the other lines don't. And so maybe this what wants to be is some kind of thing. We have the refrain. Maybe speaking of villanelles, this should be a villanelle. I mean, that's the first thing I thought when we get that, because there is a sort of soft wind when something passes by. I don't know if the sort of, people are mentioning probably cutting the sort of. There's another thing. I don't know why Pound is coming up so much, but Pound on The Wasteland, there's a famous line, or is it on Proof Rock? I can't remember. But in the notes, when he was helping Elliot edit Proof Rock, I think it is, he said, perhaps be damned, because there was a perhaps, and the perhaps just adds nothing. Like, why not just jump through? In the same way, if it's you're the one creating this story, this world, so there's no reason to say sort of, it's your world. So there's a soft wind when something passes by. But there's a soft wind when something passes by. I mean, this nice 5 that's pentameter, with a little bit of an anapest or whatever in the first foot. So there's a nice meter there to it. And then we get some nice rhymes. So what this makes me want to do is suggest reading some contemporary villanelles and some Robert Frost. Feels very Frost-like to me. And the question is, how do we tell story through the music that you're generating in these lines? And again, what we need to know is what's actually going on. So, as Tom Barlow says, the occasional rhyme makes you want more or less. And and to me, I like to go into more, I think, because it feels like those are the strongest lines, the ones that have the rhyme and have the meter going on. So, flip through, there's a very Frostian sense to this. And I would suggest flipping through some Robert Frost and noting how he tells story, though, is the main thing. Because we want, there's a sort of wind, or there's a soft wind when something passes by. And then how could a story build out of that line that tells the thing that we're not being told here, because we're still being held out of the story. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. I hope that was helpful, Ava. And next up, let's see, I'm going to label that so I know we did it. And next up, we are jumping to December 16th, Scarlett Taylor from London. And let's see. Scarlett says, I'm 17 and wondering if you know any ways for children to share poetry and get feedback without being an adult. Critique of the Week is right here. There's a lot of groups online. I don't know if we talked about this a while ago. Maybe it was on the Christine Potter episode with how vibrant online message boards and workshops used to be. You can join, our things on Facebook. the Rattles Anything Goes poetry group. There's a workshop group that's sort of dead, but you can do that. But you can get feedback from other people. So just go to a place with poetry. I'm sure there's other workshopping type poetry groups, and get some feedback from them. And for, let's see. So anyway, and 17 is too old for the Rattle Young Poets anthology. We publish 17-year-olds in Rattle all the time. Even not all the time, but we have several times. And we wouldn't. It's 15 and under for the Rattle Young Poets anthology. So let's see. How about Malak says maybe a local library will know? Yeah, I mean, just use your Google skills. Here in Southern California, we have a really wonderful place. It's called Inlandia, the Inlandia Institute, and they have workshops at libraries all over the place. I was on there, participated with their board and stuff for years before it got to be too much because I was doing too many things. But they'd have, I think, I don't know, last I saw, they have like 15 libraries around the Inland Empire, like inland of LA here in Southern California, where they have regular workshops. And so just look around, find something like that. When I was, I didn't really start writing poetry myself until my freshman year of college with James Longenbach, I think. But after college, I liked that workshop experience. And I had a little group of people. Sometimes you'll see Sarah Lou on here. She was a member of that group. And then my roommate at the time too, and then some other friends. We had like 6 of us that just met at a Barnes & Noble. And we'd get, I'd get a chai latte and sit there in a little circle and share a poem, and that's something really fun to do. Just find some people in your area. It's a great way to get out and meet friends too that have similar interests as you. When I was in high school, there was a club too, a literary magazine. If there's not a literary magazine club, start a literary magazine in your high school. So there's that too. Anyway, that's some suggestions. Let's take a look at Sweet Shop. Here we go. Sweet Shop. And again, the poet is Scarlett Taylor from London. Okay, Sweet Shop. I know they'd chew rocks if I told them they were for sale, chucking 20-pound coins, 20p, pence, I guess, coins. Sorry, I'm American and ignorant. 20p coins, as if I were a fountain waiting for their wishes to froth and bubble up in the form of little sweets. I have to handle these silver moons plucked from grass-grazed pockets, gleaming with a sticky galactic residue, and collect them with open hands. After scooping up the solar system, I reward them with vibrant gems, their eyes widening, hands outstretched, a world between those cosmic fingertips. As they totter away, pockets light years lighter, cheeks stuffed with rubies and pearls, I watch John with starry eyes counting the brimming moons like marbles in the pool of my palms. Yeah, so very nice sounds to that. Yeah, Lauren Buxbaum does say pence, so I was right about that. So Sweet Shop. So I like the sounds. I like the images. It's a nice sense of, James Langer said chew rocks caught my ear right away. There's a lot to like in here. Leela Holmes says too, ooh, I like this a lot. Yeah. So Sweet Shop. And again, we were talking about, with that poem Divorce earlier that we showed by Jose Alcantara, having divorce in the title lets us know what we're actually talking about. And so this does the same kind of thing. It's not a metaphor, but it situates us. And so we don't have to know, if the title was sometimes I feel sad, then I know they'd chew rocks. We have no idea where we were. But because we know Sweet Shop, we know we're in a sweet shop. So I know they'd chew rocks if I told them they were for sale, chucking 20-pence coins as if I were a fountain. I like that, like a fountain of coins. It's a really fun image, and that's the thing, the few strengths of this poem. And one of them is the way that the images are playing off. And chucking 20-pence coins as if I were a fountain is a really fun and unusual image. So that's really nice. Great opening line, says Sandra Fees. Yeah. Waiting for their wishes to froth and bubble up in the foam of little sweets. And so that's nice. Their wishes of frothing and bubbling is very vivid. It's a nice images here. Bill Cannon says, my blood sugar went up after I read your poem. That's funny. I have to handle these silver moons plucked from grass-grazed pockets, gleaming with a sticky galactic residue, and collect them with open hands. After scooping up the solar system, I reward them with vibrant gems. Their eyes widening, hands outstretched, a world between those cosmic fingertips. So at this point when I'm reading the poem, I'm really engaged with it. There's like we said, there's those nice images, there's nice sounds. Yeah. But then so at this point I'm waiting to sort of see where it goes. Like, what's the point of the poem? And at this point I'm totally on board and just wondering, okay, this is great, this is good. You made this like magical space where I've entered. Now what are you going to tell me? What am I going to learn there? And that is where I think the poem can be pushed forward and done more with. So instead it goes like this: as they totter away, pockets light years lighter, cheeks stuffed with rubies and pearls, I watched on with starry eyes, counting the brimming moons like marbles in the pool of my palms. And again, wonderful sound with that brimming moons like marbles in the pool of my palms. The moons in the pool, that rhyme, the alliteration with the pool and the palms. It's really nice. There we go. I was waiting for that. Leela Holmes says, I do wonder who the they is. And that they are the children, but what is the relationship between the children that you're giving the candy to? You know, we feel like that's going to be resolved and there's going to be some purpose. You know, every poem has a reason for being. A poem is this sort of like mechanical transformational spell that makes, you know, something happen. And it has like a reason for being. Like there's like something you had to say that makes you want to write the poem. Even if it's subconscious, you don't know what. It's like what your subconscious is trying to tell you. And here, I'm not really sure what, and what it is I watch on with starry eyes. You know, what is it about that? Like, what drew you into sharing this little story? You know, there's something there about maybe nostalgia, being older, not having the same appreciation for candy, maybe. There's something more to that. Yeah, as Clayton Lux has great imagery and sounds, but I'm left with it without having gone somewhere. And the somewhere is this feeling. I watch on with starry eyes. Why am I watching with starry eyes? That's the thing to interrogate and explore. You know, we call it, in a sonnet, we call it the volta, where the poem takes a turn and has some kind of turn toward purpose. And there's like a way that there's a sense of movement there. And that's sort of turning into that feeling of whatever that is that made you want to write the poem, made you have the starry eyes. You know, dig into that and sort of find a way to explain it to us. And that's the thing that's missing in the poem. Eddie Blanchard says, isn't she the shopkeeper in the shop? And that could be the case. I was... let's see. Yeah. Yeah, I guess she is the shopkeeper. That's true. But so why like be the shopkeeper? You know, it's still the starry eyes. Like, what is the drive there? And so clarifying and exploring that is the thing. So it's a great setup. For a Munson says, I think this would be a great setup for a disjunctive ending, perhaps a greedy seller. Yeah, so, you know, go somewhere and play with different. I think you've got a great start to the poem, and you can play with like different ways to take it. I mean, you know, one day write it where someone new enters the shop. Write it a different way where the the speaker, the shop owner, is sort of reimagined and transported back into childhood too, or remember something from her past, or whatever. Morgan Phoenix says, what about a fun, creepy twist? You know, but you can just try different ways to go with it and see what actually works and try to figure out what it is you were trying to say to yourself in writing the poem. Okay. So, sorry, I had a cough and drink. But Gary Rawson says, during the poem, the speaker is revealed as or becomes a cosmic goddess. And that we can push farther into that, too. Lena Holmes says, I love the power of the speaker in the first line. How can it harken back to that bit of characterization? Yeah. So, yeah. Well, anyway, let's move on to the next poem and see what we've got here. The Path to Enlightenment. Somewhere where weeds like hands reach up to the sky as if asking for forgiveness or mercy, where beauty rips holes in your heart and stitches them up with those very fingers, green train chugging on a burning track, where you are all at once surrounded and all at once alone, When the sky falls, they won't be beside you. You can't run away from the footprints you leave behind. Somewhere that cradles, air that wraps you like a mother's lullaby. But looking into her eyes, you see holes in the space of her irises, where women go for forgiveness and men go for mercy. Walking the same route, same pace, same shame, threading the sky with the eye of a needle. The sharp point digging trenches in cherry hands. It is the fire that calls to them beyond the trees, embers lining its siren song, curling the edges of patience until they flake off and fall as dying stars. They'll know they've arrived, Earth whispers, when they look down at their hands, when their skin, like coal, burns from black to gold. Yeah, so very interesting. Interesting ending there. Again, we have the same strengths. We have a really good sense of music and a sense of sort of surprising, almost surreal imagery that takes us into a new place. And so those are, again, the strengths of this poem, too. Yeah, some great images. Leela Holmes says holes in the space of her irises. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the path to enlightenment. Somewhere where weeds like hands reach. The somewhere where is again kind of like that sort of. Was that in the last poem? No, that wasn't. That was a couple poems ago. But if you jumped in the path to enlightenment, weeds like hands reach up to the sky as if asking for forgiveness. I don't think you need the somewhere. Yeah, Laura Buxton says great rhythm. Yeah, centerpiece at the beginning is too abstract. Weeds like hands reach up to the sky as if asking for forgiveness or mercy, where beauty rips holes in your heart and stitches them up with those very fingers. And now here we have the issue with what we're doing. We end up toward the end having full sentences, but up to this point we had the use of line breaks and spacing for punctuation, and that has to be done really carefully. The poet to look at there, who does it all the time, is W.S. Merwin. And there's ways that you can do that, but it's really tricky not to make it confusing. And so, to me, I trip over it every time, switches them up with those very fingers, green train, chugging. Now, if you had chugging on the line with the green train, it would be a little better, but I don't know. Maybe a stanza break for a gap if you're not going to use punctuation. But you know, there's some way to help us along. You know, the whole purpose for punctuation is to help the reader. They're little guideposts to know how to read things. And without the guideposts, it makes it a little difficult to follow the trail. And so there I trip up over it, then realize that's the track, no pun intended, you're going on. Anyway, let's see. Green train chugging on a burning track, where you are all at once surrounded and all at once alone. And so somebody said that this was too abstract, and I have to agree with that. The images, yeah, where, yeah, Senator Fees, it was said the beginning is too abstract. And I don't really know where to put these things. There's some nice images, but again, they're disembodied. In the last poem, we had the sweet shop, so we can know where to put stuff. But here, I don't know where to put stuff, really. So we're sort of imagining the space. There's weeds, there's a train, there's beauty, but it's hard to visualize beauty. Or mercy, Up to the sky as if asking for forgiveness or mercy, where beauty rips holes in your heart and stitches them up with those very fingers. So it sounds nice, but to actually visualize that, I'm having a little bit of trouble. And there's a train all of a sudden chugging on a burning track where you are all at once surrounded and all at once alone. When the sky falls, they won't, and we don't know who they is. They won't be beside you. Yeah. You can't run away from the footprints you leave behind. That's a nice line. So there's nice lines in here, but they're sort of swirling around too much. There's a really nice thing. Where was it? So Leela Holmes says, Terrence Hayes asked during workshops where the heat of each poem is. And for me, that heat is right in the middle. And that's a great way to put it too from Terrence. I hadn't heard him say that before, but yeah, that's kind of what we talk about. Like the poem's like reason for being. There's a certain point where we sort of, a poem finds itself. It's the energy that it needed to be released when it was written. So anyway, somewhere that, let's see, where do we go? Somewhere that cradles air that wraps you like a mother's lullaby, but looking into her eyes, you see holes in the space of her irises, where women go for forgiveness and men go for mercy, walking the same route, same pace, same shame, threading the sky with the eye of a needle. The sharp point digging trenches and cherry hands. It is the fire that calls to them beyond the trees, embers lining its siren song, curling the edges of patience until they flake off and fall as dying stars. They'll know they've arrived, Earth whispers, when they look down at their hands, when their skin like coal burns from black to gold. And so that is the path to enlightenment. And otherwise, I mean, I like the end here. That's very vivid and concrete. The skin turning like coal burns from black to gold. I think that's very nice. Brandy Askin says, intriguing, great rhythms and images. I'm not sure the U is working. Feels extraneous. I think the first line could be improved. Yeah, so I wanted to point out that the U is one of the things that keeps distance. Back a long time ago, Stella Sully, the original editor of Rattle, used to go on about you poems. She really didn't like the second person because the second person is used to keep things at an artificial distance very often. Because you don't really know who the you is, so you can kind of keep it like abstract, even though it feels like you're not. And so it's sort of a tricky kind of way to keep your own distance as a writer. Yeah. Tom Brown says, and this is a good point, he says, the poet might find a group of poets her own age too elementary for her talent. She could workshop with more sophisticated poets. I would definitely say that too, because these poems there's really nice music and rhythms there and great lines. Amy Dower Solorzano says, I enjoy the poem, but I agree that we have too many abstract concepts introduced at once. So forgiveness, mercy, beauty, patience. So what, so the path to enlightenment, what if we like took this sort of concept of the poem, but really felt like we're storytelling of somebody on this path, like she walks where weeds like hands reach up to the skies if asking forgiveness or mercy, where beauty rips holes in her heart, and then you could have her like instead of having this you that's like this disembodied distance, you can have an actual subject, like a character in a play. Imagine it being like a scene in a movie or a play where one person is walking through the stage and these things are happening. And then the nice thing about that is you can manipulate that as a character to have things happen, have reactions. And I think that's the way that I would go for this. Yeah. So, okay. Well, anyway, I think that's going to be it for this poem. But hopefully this was helpful. We want to get through as many as we can today, and we've only got through 2 so far. Winston Munn says, is it enlightenment or someone coming of age? Yeah. Leah Holmes says, go for your MFA, kiddo. Yeah, MFA, if you can afford it or get it free, it's nice. I would not spend any money on it, though. Is my advice. There are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of workshops, friends. I mean, just making groups of people, making friends with especially one of the nice things about being younger is that people, feel good about helping you out. And you can find groups of people that are really supportive, I think. So, especially, online. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to the next poet. But that was really, really fun, good music and good lines in that poem. That was Scarlett Taylor from London. Next, let's go to... sorry, it's taking a bit to load. Come on, Submittable. Yeah, I think Submittable got like extra security recently. The login has changed, and it's a little too careful. Okay, so the next poet is Petra Yao from Linden. Mackenzie Linden. Let's see. Does it say, if I go over here, where is that? G.Y. Lyndon G.Y. Where is that? Lyndon G.Y. I have no idea. Region 10. Anyway, I'm curious where this place is. But the poet, once again, is Petra Yao. And no general questions. So let's take a look at the poem. And the poem is called The Rock. It's in the subject of the poem. It's one of those pasted in versions. So here you go. Paste or type your poem there. The Rock. If only someone somewhere would take a chance on someone, be it near or far as they dream, as far as they wish, a wish of the impossible to soar beyond the imagination of limitations placed by fear of negativity, placed in their minds by family, friend, or foe, made by envious minds and wicked plots by many who see the potential of what can be done if given the chance to win, the chance to prosper, the chance to survive, the chance to help, and above all, the chance to change. And so I mean, for my advice for this one is to look back at what we've already talked about how we want to hear the story. Like, these are all abstractions. They're sort of a political type or an inspirational type message that's trying to be presented, but there's none of those details and none of that storytelling that make us actually engage and connect. There's nothing sticky in this poem. They're all sort of generalized concepts with a distance. Like that you we were talking about before, where it's much better if we say she and have a character. The same thing going on here. If only someone somewhere would take a chance on someone. So we have these someone somewhere taking a chance on someone. Like, we don't know what's going on. If we have a specific person, and so we can start to make an actual scene out of what's going on, then we can connect with it. But the abstraction just doesn't work in a way that we connect with. So details, concrete characters, story, tell us what you're actually thinking. All those things are what applies here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next poem. I think there's only the one submitted. Next up, let's have Nick Van Auwerkerk from... I don't know where this is either. Submittable does a terrible job of telling you where the actual addresses are. You have to download a Excel file to actually see what country peoples are in. This is Oyster Bed Bridge, PE, which is somewhere, but I don't know where. Okay, so the poem is Branch's general question. When I read my poetry from years ago, I cringe. When I read any current poem I'm working on back to myself today, I have a hard time not looking at it through in 5 years, I'm going to cringe at this lens. I don't really have a question about that. Well, yeah, I mean, that's something that does happen. I think my daughter is a example. She writes tons of songs. She wrote a whole book, a whole novel when she was during the lockdown, during the COVID, when she was how old was she? I guess she would have been 7 or so. She wrote a whole 250-page novel. Refuses to look at it or do anything with it because it's so cringe now, but it's actually really good. So don't let that hold you back, I guess, is my point. But let's look at these poems. And of course, the solution to writing, to not looking back at poems and cringe about them is to know what you're doing and to learn skills, pay attention to workshops, follow the critique of the week, watch this every week. Don't just watch the one time your poems here, because we talk about all the ways, and they're not just some kind of, conventions that we're talking about. They're ways that storytelling actually works, that ways that things are actually memorable, that we actually become engaged and feel. And so all those tools that we're learning here and any other workshops that you do are things to deploy in your poems. And if those are working right and they're deployed properly in ways that function, then you won't feel that way about the poems. So that's the advice in general for that question. Okay, let's look at the poems themselves, though. Here we go. First one is Justification, and I think there's 2 poems here. Justification. The first snow of winter covers the deck, except for a warm circle of wood where the white husky sat, her snout tipped slightly up, receiving the fat snowflakes like communion. She is in the yard now, closer to the barn, sensing once again the pull of purpose, the promise just inside the barn walls where the nylon tethers of her Sunday best hang neatly, as they have for nearly 9 months, beside the freshly waxed blue sled. Beyond the barn, winter settles slowly into the congregation of fields and farmland. There she will give peace and thanks for 3 good months of perfectly packed snow, for her chance to indulge in the meaning of it all. So that is Justification. So again, this is very similar actually to the Sweet Shop poem as far as how I feel while reading it. Some really nice lines I'm really engaged with, but then I'm looking toward the end. Once I get through, to me it's up to here. Why is this poem being written? And I'm not, I guess, there is sort of an attempt at going in this direction, but it's not something that I feel compelled or satisfied with, I would say. And I think there's something more to it than this. So, but let's start from the top. Justification, similar to that divorce title. It could be the lead into what the poem's actually about. But let's look at it line by line. The first snow of winter covers the deck except for a warm circle of wood where the white husky sat. I had a little bit of trouble with this. I like the idea. The warm circle of wood. I think maybe the word wood, because you don't know, because of the break, we like to talk about having line breaks where we're sort of surprised by where the poem goes, but sometimes it can be too surprising and throw you off a little bit. And for me, I'm already, the first snow of winter covers the deck except for a warm circle of, and then when I see a warm circle of wood, I'm imagining like a wood pile, and then I get where the husky sat, and I'm wondering why the wood pile is where the husky used to sit. It just throws me off a little bit. And it's that use of wood, the ambiguity there. And then coupled with a line break makes it a little bit confusing. It just takes you in the wrong place. So there, instead of just wood, I think maybe something that just visualize the deck wood, like planks, or for a warm circle of wooden planks, or a warm circle of bare wood, or a warm circle of mahogany, something that takes us away from that idea of like a pile of wood. Anyway, but otherwise, so just one little tweak there. Otherwise, where the white husky sat, her snout tipped slightly up, receiving the fat snowflakes like communion. I think it's a really nice, it's one of those really nice metaphors and images where I see it and I assume it must have be like unoriginal because it feels so strong, but I don't think I've ever come across people taking fat snowflakes like communion or a dog. So I think it's really great. It's one of those things, really nice line there. She's in the yard now, closer to the barn, sensing once again the pull of purpose, the promise just inside the barn walls. So the sense of purpose I was a little confused by too. Because where the nylon tethers of her Sunday best. Maybe the thing is I'm not really sure what the Sunday best is, the nylon tether as they have. So is it like an actual dog sled? It's almost time. Yeah, I guess so. As they have for nearly 9 months beside the fleshly waxed blue sled. Okay. And so, so this is a dog that's actually going to be pulling a sled, which is unusual but interesting. Okay. Beyond the barn, winter settles slowly into the congregation of fields. I like the phrase congregation of fields, and it harkens back to the communion, which is really nice. Fields and farmland, there she will give peace and thanks. And this is where the poem, it feels like the poet knew that it had to say something sort of more profound and have some kind of turn, some kind of summarizing thing, but didn't find the right thing. And that's really what's missing in the poem, other than that one little change I would make there. Where she will give peace and thanks for 3 good months of perfectly packed snow, for a chance to indulge in the meaning of it all. Anytime you end with sort of an explanation, like a summary, it's so much better to end on some kind of concrete way to personify that, or to make that concrete. And so how can we get to that point? Like, she's been waiting all year, and this is what's the purpose of life for her, is pulling that sled, right? How do we show that without just telling us that? And how does that relate maybe to us all or something? I mean, there's just more there that feels like it's not really fleshed out, and it's not really dug into in the same way that it didn't in the Sweet Shop. Even though there's sort of a nice pace and a really nice setup, it's missing its ending. Let's see. Yeah, Winston Munn says a good poem searching for an equally good ending. Yeah. Andy Blanchard said the ending doesn't fit with a title. What is the justification for? I can't remember the title. Yeah. Yeah, Nancy Taylor says it's the Huskies' religion, communion, and all. And maybe that's the thing. Like, maybe we really want to dig even further into that metaphor. Which isn't even a metaphor, really, when you think about it. I mean, it really is her religion. Annie Blanchard's a communion would be a better title. Yeah, as Amy Dower Solorzano says, I think the poem is very close if the poet can nail the ending and potentially adjust the title. Nancy Schnell says justification is a faith term. That's interesting. How is that a faith term? Where does that come into play? I mean, faith would be an interesting title. Having faith that the purpose will return. Dr. Q says I would prefer to see a more concrete meaning for the last line. It is. It's all about the ending. Yeah. Look over on Facebook. Jamie Milton says it's a poem about a reason to be. Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, that's the Husky's whole purpose. The whole reason for being is that waiting for the snow, which is like the joy that it has. I'm not sure, I've had dogs. I've had several dogs. And they feel like they live, though, so much more in the moment. Even if it is your, favorite time of year, do they really, sit waiting for the snow? Yeah. Is that maybe too much of a projection? I'm not sure. I mean, I just could be wrong. It's your dog. Yeah. J. Milton says over on Facebook too, the congregation of fields and farmland says so much about this place. It does, yeah. I mean, those little details, we can describe them really simply but precisely in a way that tells a lot of things. Those are great. I mean, those are the best lines that make poetry really work. So it's just a matter of finding the ending. Let's see. Look at her as I was over there. Let's see. Morgan Phoenix has also a pronoun problem in those last three lines. Grammatically, she seems to refer to winter. Oh, that's interesting. I assume that was the dog. There she will give peace and thanks for 3 good months of perfectly packed snow and her chance to indulge in the meaning of... I think that's the dog. Yeah. Brad Sullivan says, to justify the ways of God to men. A quote from Milton. Winston Munn says, I think the ending should bore into the religious slant of nature and dogs. Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where I can't really tell exactly where the poem should go. I can't write the last line. It's just missing the last couple lines that really, connect and, nail it home. No pun intended. Okay. Let's move on to the next poem here. And this is The Usefulness of Major Poets to a Family Man. So that's kind of an amusing title off the bat. I found that interesting. Here is a collection of major poets from the used bookstore on Queen Street. On page 64, across the wasteland is something scribbled that only a 4-year-old might understand, missed in quality control by the shopkeeper's blind eye. The creases of smooth dog ears stop at page 24, the underlined words at 15. Near the middle, I stop to savor some rhythm and frost, ask my wife if she wants to hear it. At 6 months pregnant, she says, right now, she doesn't feel like poetry. So here, we do have a nice turn, to the wife. And this is the kind of thing I think maybe that the earlier poem is missing. Like some kind of turn in perspective or, and when we talk about making it concrete, like how can we add something solid at the end like that? And it's not like it's like some striking image here, but it's what the wife says 6 months pregnant. She doesn't feel like poetry. And that has a sense of movement to the poem, and a sense of finality, too. Hemet Malak says, sweet. Yeah. So, the usefulness of major poets to a family man. Here's a collection of major poets from the used bookstore on Queen Street. On page 64, across the wasteland, is something scribbled that only a 4-year-old might understand. So this part, line of ours, missed in quality control by the shopkeeper's blind eye. So, I mean, I've never heard of someone like erasing the marginalia in a book. Why would the shopkeeper want quality control on there? And I've never seen that done before, so it seems a little strange to me. That line, the creases of smooth dog ears stop at page 24. I love this detail, and the underlined words at 15. So the sense. I always love these poems. You get these poems a lot about looking into a book and seeing all the little notes there. It's one of those wonderful things. As the world moves more online, we lose that sense of the marginalia and that connection that you have. I can't remember who was on the Rattlecast. It might have been Tim Siebels, maybe, talking about when he picks up a book like that his mother who's passed away read once. He feels like he's entering the same room as that she did, and she's like a ghost in there with him because she read the same book. There's that really great feeling of going on the journey with someone, and then those details about the dog ears ending and the stopping at page 24, and then the underlined word stopping at 15, so you kind of gave up on it. I think it's a really nice detail there. Let's see. Near the middle, I stop to savor the rhythm of frost. Ask my wife if she wants to hear it. And we get the nice turn. It's 6 months pregnant, she says. Right now, she doesn't feel like poetry. I think that's a nice movement. So to me, I think a few more details here, and I think I don't really understand this one. But D. Coleman says the bookseller might have priced the book lower had he seen the margin notes. I think if that's the case, we should explain that a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, but Eddie Blanchard said, I think the last 2 lines about the quality control could be left out. It doesn't really seem to add anything. And also, when you have these kind of, the poem is diving into the details of this book, always having more and more interesting details. We can add a little bit and embellish a little bit. Make it a little bit more vivid, but I like the sense of the direction. I like the usefulness. I like the way the title plays into the ending, and really, it's poetry's great and important, but other things are also more important sometimes, especially at that time of life. And so it makes a lot of sense, and it's a good trajectory for the poem too. Amy Arnold Fernandez says, I love that the wife part really speaks to the feeling of pregnancy, especially because the author can't ever personally know what that feels like. Yeah, great point. Yeah, so I really like the progression. So we just sort of, spruce up with a little more detail and clarify. Or just delete these 2 lines. I think, on page 64, across the wasteland is something scribbled that only a 4-year-old might understand. I think this whole stanza, I like I like the noting where the dog ears stop and the underlined words stop. I think the detail in this stanza just entirely isn't as interesting as the other details in the poem. So maybe find something, even if this might be accurate, describing something as a childlike scribble doesn't, it's not as interesting as other things. So I think maybe finding a little more detail in that description might work. Let's see. How about Malak says, please keep a blind eye. If you want to keep the blind eye, then I think dig more into it. But I don't know. I think it doesn't really fit completely, and it's not as interesting as other stuff. Let's see. Laura Buxton says, I kind of disagree with which aspect. I feel like it's clear and not sure I'd add detail. Add detail to... yeah. Eddie Blanchard said, I was thinking a 4-year-old actually made the scribble. I don't think so. I think it's just the 4-year-old might have enough imagination to understand. But let's see. I don't know. I think that it's unclear and not as interesting. Yeah. So I would work on this section. But otherwise, I think I like the poem. Okay, let's do one more. Again, those are poems and interesting poems. Thanks for sharing from Nick Van Kirk, from Oysterbed Bridge, wherever that is. And let's go. Yes, Margaret says another good poem. Yeah. Okay, let's go next to. Oh, I'm saying it like that. But next up we have Ezzy Lawrence. This will be the last poem of the day. It's Duck. The Duck. No questions in general. Ezzy Lawrence is from Ironwood, Michigan. Here we go. So just this pasted in text. The poem is called The Duck. So you get it all on the screen here. A duck sat in a pond. He ate a fish. He liked it. He told his family to eat fish also. They also liked it. Eventually, there were no fish left in the pond. They moved ponds. Soon, there were no fish left there either. The ducks were quite fat by now, eating so many fish. They were getter greedy. They wanted bigger fish. Let's go to the ocean, they cried. There are bigger fish there. So they flew to the ocean. They were indeed big fish, maybe too big in fact, for the fish ate them. Moral, don't be greedy, be happy with things you have. Second moral, don't overeat, or something will eat you. So this is a parable type poem. And to me, this is a perfect example of like show, don't tell. Like you don't want to have to say the moral, because then it just doesn't have any power. Like we talk about the stickiness of a thing. We can remember ducks eating all the fish in their pond because that's an interesting story. There's a nice, fable aspect to it. But then telling us the moral at the end, unless it's like clever, like there's a way you could have the moral be something completely surprising and unusual, and that works to tell what the moral is at the end. But to break that third wall here to tell us what we already know doesn't work. So a very clear chop off this moral thing, first of all. And even this, even this is sort of too leading. Like you want to. One of the things we talk about, I can't remember where this even came from. Is this something that I thought of? I can't remember. Is it from some poetry teacher I had once? I do have a bit of the brain fog today, as I mentioned. But there's that movie Hitch, and they talk about how when you kiss someone, you can go like 80%, but you got to let them go the last 20, or else it's like not two people kissing. It's like you inflicting yourself on someone else. And that principle applies to like all poems. Like you want to put forth like 80% and then let the reader participate in that final leap to connect with it, and to make sense of like, this is why you're telling me this. So let the story just sit there. If we look at, and let the sort of the strangeness of it sit. The strangeness of a parable is kind of one of the things that makes it sticky and makes you remember and connect with it. So, let's see. Nancy Sebanek says a parable, not a poem. Elementary. Well, I'd say a parable can be a poem, and there's an elementary style to the writing, which kind of works as a play on that if we played it up, So, anyway, the poem's called The Duck. A duck sat in a pond. So these simple, short, blunt sentences are like very childish, and there's a way that can work if you do it a certain way. Perfect. So Hamat Malak is about to say, her last comment is exactly what I was going to say, but even a more vivid example. So anyway, I'll add Hamat's at the end. Ready? So a duck sat in a pond. He ate fish. He ate a fish. He liked it. He told his family to eat a fish also. They also liked it. Eventually, there were no fish left in the pond. They moved ponds. Soon, there were no fish left there either. The ducks were quite fat by now, eating so many fish. They were getter... I don't know what getter greedy is either. I forgot about that, but it's not a phrase I've ever heard. It seems strange to me. Getter greedy. But it seems like it's some kind of idiom. They were getter greedy. They wanted bigger fish. Let's go to the ocean, they cried. There are some big fish there. So they flew to the ocean. Sorry, I gotta find Hamat's again. So they flew to the ocean, feathers everywhere. And, so that, like, just the idea of, so we can make the leap that the bigger fish ate them and there's, like, just feathers floating in the ocean is all that's left. That's the kind of thing you want the reader to make. We want to set us all up to make this connection ourselves so that we participate. Laura Beckstone says getter is a typo for getting, I think. They were getting greedy. That could be too. Yeah, that would make more sense in the context of the poem. I think they were getting greedy even is a little too telling. I think you just skip that line altogether. Ducks were quite fat by now, eating so many fish. They wanted bigger fish. Let's go to the ocean, they cried. So there are big fish there. So they flew to the ocean. And I was just going to say, like symbolically show that they were eaten, but don't tell us. And that's exactly what Hamat did with her feathers everywhere line, which I think is pretty perfect. Yeah. Leela Holmes says, I want the duck to make a home in the big fish and then eat the fish. The fish eats, and then it's just fish eating inception, like mature Chalcatals. That's the thing, too. When these kind of parable type poems actually work, it's when they like leap into surreal ways. And of course, the Russell Edson is the biggest poet that does these kind of poems. He specializes in that. Let me like pull up if I can find something. Another one to look at. He does more sort of longer ones. Is James Tate does a lot of poems like that where it's sort of surreally leaps. Well, I should do one in Rattle. Well, I don't know. Russell Edson poems. Let's see. I'm just randomly picking one. Why is these websites stink? Okay. Trying to find one that's short. Oh, gosh. Okay, well, I'm not pulling anything up fast enough. But anyway, you can find some Russell Edson poems. Jose Hernandez has had some poems in Rattle. They're like that. Windmill Farm is the one. I think I pulled this up on Critique of the Week not too long ago. Maybe we'll just show you this one. How poems leap into the surreal. Or what's his other one? Let me see. Hang on a second. Let me look at this. What's the other one we had of his? Because we had two, I think, right? Maybe not. Did we just have the one? Oh, it's Jose Hernandez Diaz. It's Windmill Farm. Well, let me just read this, and we'll share it, because I like this poem. Here we go. Windmill Farm. And this is just an example of the way that you can let storytelling sort of leap into strange ways while just being vivid and concrete and concise and make a poem interesting. And it's that like sort of slightly surreal, like slightly off feeling that makes it compelling and sticky. I guess that's the word of the day. It sticks in your brain because it's like a little bit unusual. There's like an uncanniness to it. So here's The Windmill Farm from Jose Hernandez Diaz. The Windmill Farm. I was drawing a windmill into the fog and the mirror after a shower when I thought, why am I drawing a windmill into the fog and a mirror? Then I answered, I'm drawing a windmill because it's a metaphor for rain. Next, I wiped the windmill off the mirror with my towel and got ready for work. I work at a windmill farm, 45 miles east of Los Angeles. The job consists mostly of staring at windmills. Mondays, we meditate under the windmills. The company brings in a yogi with a PhD in philosophy. Tuesdays are Texas Hold'em Tuesdays. Wednesdays, we stare at the windmills with absolute fear. Thursdays, we check for mechanical failures and other duties as necessary. Fridays, we wipe the windmill blades clean of flies and mosquito guts. Then on weekends, I watch boxing and long for the swishing sounds of the windmill farm. Weekends are tough, but it's only 2 days. And so, so just from this image of drawing a windmill into the fog on a mirror, he spins this whole story that sort of makes sense, but sort of doesn't. And sort of feels like it has a meaning there underneath, but you're not quite sure what. And it just has this sort of, unsettling, like unsettled, not unsettling, but like unsettled, like incomplete, but almost complete sense, which is actually interesting too. One of the things, that's really how haiku actually work. There's the sonics of it are about what's missing actually. And it's the same kind of thing. Like there's something that you feel like just quite there, almost missing. And it's really, anyway, you could do that kind of thing. And so that's why I like the idea of it getting increasingly surreal. like somebody, I can't remember who suggested, but where it becomes like this Matryoshka dolls, whatever that word is, Matryoshka, whatever that is, where the fish just keep eating and they eat more inside and it just becomes strange. So if you could make this poem spin off in a strange direction, it becomes even better. But I do love Hamat Malak's suggestion too of just having the feathers floating there at the end. Anyway, we're going to wrap up the critique. I can't believe I actually made it through a whole one because I really don't feel that well. But hopefully we'll feel better by Sunday. This Sunday's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Maz bin Bilal. And so Maz, if you're a subscriber to Rattle, and you would have the winter issue, the summer issue. The summer issue is a tribute to Ghazals. His book is Ghazalnama. He's also a scholar. He's translated a whole bunch of Indian poets, including a lot of ghazals. It's just a wonderful poet and a lot of insights into the ghazal form. So we talked to him about that. He'll be sharing some newer poems mostly, I believe. Some ghazals, not necessarily all ghazals, but it'll be a lot of ghazal talk with a lot of examples. And it should be a great episode. But note the special time. So Maz he's actually not in India right now. He's spending the summer in England, I think. But it's like 2 a.m. there at our regular time. So we have to move it back. We're moving it back to noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. So I'll just roll out of bed, get some coffee, and start the Rattlecast. It might be midday for you. This is a great opportunity to, if you don't usually get to participate because it's too late in the day for you, then you can, do your critique or your Poet Respond poem, or your Prompt Lines poem. If you don't usually get to participate because it's too late, it's a great week for you. We're going to have another early show, even an hour earlier, in August. It's going to be 8 a.m. For me, 11 a.m. Pacific. We're going to have one in August. So there's going to be a few opportunities if you're like not a night person and the Rattlecast is usually too late. These are 2 shows for you where you can actually participate live too. But the guest is going to be Maz bin Bilal, Rattlecast 252, Sunday, July 7th, noon Eastern. 9 a.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.